Hi there, and welcome to Iron Clay. This is a process video of one of my sculptures, Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster from the classic Universal movie from the 1930s. I started actually sculpting a human head a little bit beforehand and quite liked it, and started resembling a little bit of the Frankenstein monster, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna try and do as closer of a sort of a copy, but keeping it a little bit sort of slightly different to the original 1930s Frankenstein. As you can probably see, the video quality is quite bad. This is using just the webcam on my computer, and it's not the best, as well as the lighting is pretty poor, and so hence the details are quite rough and a bit noisy. So sorry about that, it's what it is, and hopefully I'll be remedying the situation shortly, as I probably want to invest in a better quality camera. But yeah, I mean, Frankenstein monster, the classic movie Universal Frankenstein, was an inspiration to a lot of creators, a lot of modelers and sculptors, because it was just, for its time, an amazing feat of movie makeup. The actor was Boris Karloff, if I remember correctly, and the makeup artist was the famous Jack Pierce, who did a lot of the early Universal makeups. He did Frankenstein, Wolfman, The Mummy as well. And think about the makeups that he did back then, when he had such limited access to materials, as in he actually built up a lot of the makeups using simply cotton and gum and collide or something like, I can't quite remember the name. I think it was called collide. It's sort of a syrupy thing that they used to put on top of the cotton to actually build up layer after layer of prosthetic makeup. And it just, the skill involved and the time involved in making those sort of makeups is a little bit staggering, and especially when you think about matching it from scene to scene and trying to get that makeup looking the same time after again, you know, considering it still took a lot of time to get right. And so yeah, a huge amount of respect for that skill back then. So yeah, Jack Pierce sort of started a lot of the current makeups that we have today. Anyway, about the actual sculpture, as you can probably see, I normally sort of bulk up using kitchen aluminium foil. I find it fairly easy to use, inexpensive, and also it's sort of forgiving in terms of bulking up. So if I find that I actually need to have a little bit thinner piece, I can just press down and it scrunches up. As long as you sort of don't compress the foil too tightly to begin with, it gives you a huge amount of flexibility in how you use it. I'm just building up layers. I've got this amazing, well, not amazing, it's just a standard pasta maker that I bought from a charity shop here in the UK. Managed to get it for £4, and with it I can get really thin layers of super sculpey clay to actual build up layers, and that's really quite handy. Try and get an even sort of layer on top of the foil framework. The armature I use is simply copper piping for plumbers that you use for radiators and central heating systems. I actually had a look at buying some armature, metal armatures, to do some sculpting, but I was a bit staggered by the actual cost that these sculpting shops were charging. It was, I think one shop was trying to sell a metal armature for about £50. Now I'm absolutely confident that it is a very good quality product, but considering this is just a hobby and something I just I'm playing around with, spending £3-4 to actually make my own is a much cheaper way of doing it, and hence that's how I did it. The tool I'm using here is a rake tool that I've also made. I think that's probably one of the things that I learnt most about this Frankenstein sculpture, and that is using the rake tool. I didn't really use it beforehand, and I've come to absolutely love it, and I wish I'd sort of learnt about it straight from the beginning, because it's an amazing tool that actually helps me, or helps everybody, to level off the surface of the sculpture. Now, no matter how good you are at actually smoothing out and laying your clay, you'll always find dips and sort of rises of the actual clay where it sort of peaks, and no matter how good you are, I don't think you can actually get it completely smooth. But the rake tool has, essentially using a thick loop tool and cutting into it to making notches, you can run that on the clay, and it sort of takes off the high points and levels it off to make it a little bit smoother. Anyway, it's one of the tools that I sort of made myself, and I love it, and it's fantastic, and I would recommend anybody who's starting up sculpting to actually make their own rake. It's just a Dremel and cutting in notches. I think you can probably make one out of saw blade and just looping that around a pencil. And that's what I love about this sort of hobby, is that you don't really need to have a huge amount of money to actually do it. If you've got the time and willing to put the effort, you can make all of your tools yourself at home for very inexpensively, and that's what I did at the beginning. Since then, I've sort of invested in some tools through eBay and Amazon, but they are still very inexpensive, and I think I spent in total, tool-wise, about £25, which is like $35, and with that, a huge range of tools that I use. But ultimately, I end up finding myself using the same ones time and time again, so I think I probably have 5 tools that I utilize. And the main one is this one. This is the toothpick one, but the ball-ended stylus. I find those really quite handy in actually putting new clay in and then blending the new clay onto the existing, and you can quickly make it stick to it quite well. The other one is a toothpick. It's one of the most utilized tool that I have, and it costs virtually nothing. I've got it in the cupboard in the kitchen, and with that I can put so much small detail onto a sculpture. Now, the hair, this is the first sculpture that I've done that actually has hair. I had to actually work out how to make hair, and I look at it and think, well, I've failed in many different ways, but at the time I thought, yeah, this was a reasonable effect. Luckily, Frankenstein's monster from the 1930s had very, very flat hair stuck onto it. It didn't have a huge amount of volume, so it made my life a lot easier when it came to cutting it. So I simply rolled out sheets of clay, and then from that nibbled away at the edges to make it look like individual strands covering the forehead. And this trick is using some cling film and a toothpick, and it's great for adding details like pores and scratches and all the imperfections on the skin, because if you do it without the cling film, you will put the details, but it also sort of makes it a little bit harsher, and that sometimes is what I want and sometimes what you need, but other times you want a little bit soft. You want the pressure to be softened around the area so it lays a little bit more naturally. The other tool which I love is simply a brush, and using the brush, especially with skin, I find that it gives a great effect, especially when you cover the sculpture with a little bit of 90% alcohol. Now, alcohol, especially stronger alcohols, 90%, 70%, will soften Super Sculpey and make it a little bit sort of tacky. And whilst it's in that kind of state, brushing it with a brush, just a paintbrush, will smooth out a lot of imperfections. We'll get rid of dust. We'll get rid of all the little particles that sort of collect on the surface whilst you're sculpting, but also it will add these tiny minute brush marks onto the surface, and that's really quite nice when you're dealing with human skin or skins, because it gives this tiny minute wrinkles and makes it, I think, a little bit more realistic. Again, going back into the nose with the loop tool and carving out, making it a little bit sort of softer. The ears with Grandpa Franky, I wasn't quite happy with by the end, and I think that I wish I spent a little bit more time fine-tuning it and making them look a little bit more natural and a little bit less sort of jutting out. One of the fun things about Frankenstein's monster and the makeup, which I didn't realize until fairly recently, was the fact that a lot of people thought the makeup was amazing, especially in regards to getting the hollow look in the jaws. No one could work out how that makeup was actually done, but it actually turned out that Boris Karloff, the actor, didn't actually have teeth, and so he simply, for the role, took out his dentures, and of course then you get that hollow cheek structure, which is great for sort of a zombie look. And again, this is simply what I did with the hair, with a toothpick, just cutting into the clay to make hair strands, and looking back at it, thinking that's probably not the best way to do it. Probably building up layers of actual strands of clay could have been a little bit better and gave it a little bit more definition and a little bit more detail, but I think next time that will be what I will try. A few things about hair though is it's really important to think about the crown of the hair, where the hair comes out from. If you don't include that, I quickly realized it did not look natural at all. So trying to find where the crown is and work from that and pull the actual details from that makes it a lot more realistic. And again, since I worked on this face and smoothed it out, I had to go back again and try and put the paws in. Now, looking back at it again, those details might have been a little bit too much because the sculpture is fairly small, and putting those paws, even though as humans, as you age, your skin gets and your paws get larger and larger. So in that respect, an older Frankenstein would have bigger paws, but I think I slightly overdid it with this one. And there you go, Grandpa Franky out of the oven, baked. I love the way Super Sculpey looks straight after the oven. It's got that translucent skin tone that looks quite lifelike, and the smell is fantastic as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time.